Thank you so much for what you've offered us. What is your sense, given the modalities that you describe, of the best hope of humanizing these subjects?
Of humanizing?
And then what does that humanization actually give us?
You mean humanizing, right?
Humanizing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in a way we have to humanize contexts, we have to humanize economies, we have to humanize the norms that guide, say, this current economy. It's a real challenge. But I think that one of the contextual variables here is that this type of power does not know how to govern itself. So it becomes quite self-destructive. We see that certainly with high finance, and we see that with other kinds of economic notions where, you know, it's the raiding notion. You get as much as you can for yourself, and you let the rest disappear. I had some slides here on no, what do I have to do now? I think I have to go back onto the foreclosure. Oh, the slides are off. I see. Okay, so the foreclosures. I don't know if people know in the United States, subprime mortgage, etc. 9 million households have been thrown out of their houses. Now, a household could be one person, 3 people, 5, whatever. I'm Dutch. The total population of my country is 15 million people. The equivalent of that has been evicted. Now, those are savage. These are savage. And a lot of this becomes invisible. We have tent cities, we have slab cities in the desert. They disappear. There's a kind of the capacity of the system to render invisible. So in that sense, I return to the space of the city, to the space of the community. And here, one of the issues that I'm working with is this whole notion of relocalizing production, relocalizing a lot of the stuff that now we have delegated to higher, more encompassing levels. Let's bring it back down. At that point, the household and the community are key sites for not just producing elements for survival. We all depend on, you know, we're not fully self-sufficient at all. And I think that sort of the talking, narrating, re-narrating, this whole trouble that I have with this invisibility bit, you know, what is rendered invisible. So those are some of the strategies. These domestic workers organizing themselves in New York because they understood. They refused to be flattened into being just a cleaning woman. They could see what was on, that kind of a thing, you know, that is, those are sort of the instrumentalities. Now, when I'm in the global south, it often has to do with other things. Food production becomes very important. Small rural manufacturing becomes very important. In a city like New York, in a city like Los Angeles, those are less, or whatever European cities, more difficult. So, you know, everything is very situated. But what I see, ironically, is this mixture of a global subjective or semantic zone where we can communicate across cultures without sacrificing our specific cultures and conditions, but at the same time a situated set of survival strategies, survival both very variable, very elementary at the one end, and more complex in terms of the political, the subjective, etc. at the other end. I don't know if people follow what I'm saying. I sort of jumped through a few in-betweens. Yes. Why don't I collect 2 or 3 questions, because I tend to give long answers. I have a problem here. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your thoughts this morning. I'm wondering, I don't know if you actually completed your thoughts about the concept of expulsion that you began to talk about, and I'm really interested in that in regards to the U.S. economy, how I think you were saying that it's beginning to actually expel.
Yeah. Okay, good, yes. And let me take 2 more questions, because we are running out of time.
Muchas gracias. Yo soy Hilda, and I would like to know if there is a rethinking of development in the Global South, groups of women rethinking this, and what are they thinking? Gracias.
Great. Yes.
I think it's going to take me a long time to kind of digest what you've said. So
you can take tonight.
Yes.
Look at all the slides, yes.
But given that you have an audience of people who fund women, can you give us your kind of top focus areas that you would recommend
Fantastic,
for us?
yes, great. So let me start with expulsions. I'm working on this. There's a lot to be said. But I think that, say, if you take the Keynesian period, just to take a contrast, and you positioned yourself, this is analytic tactics, at the edge of the system. The edge of the system is not the geographic edge. It can be right there in the middle of Manhattan. And you ask the question, does this system, very vague word, but anyway, let me for shorthand, bring in people or expel? In the Keynesian period, the system brought in people. Mind you, there was discrimination, there was racism. It brought them in not because it was a nice system, but because it needed consumers. It was based on mass consumption, mass construction of suburban housing, mass manufacturing. You needed consumers because you needed consumers and you were fairly closed. You had reasonable wages. A systematicity that works towards incorporating. Not because it's a humanitarian thing, but because that is the mechanics, the machinery. Today, you put yourself at that edge, and you see expel. So what we have is, on the one hand, an incredibly more integrated economic system in terms of the financial logic. The thing about finance is, what makes it dangerous is its logic. Finance is not about money. I always say, traditional banking is a bank sells money it has. High finance is about selling money, so to speak, it does not have. In that not having lies its creativity, all these creative classes, etc. But also, and this is the critical issue that often sort of escapes observation, it needs to invade other sectors and subject them to its financial logic. When the United States government in 1977 develops the subprime mortgage, it's a state project to help people get housing. When finance develops this distortion of a subprime mortgage, it's a financial project. It's not a state project. It didn't matter. The value of the house didn't matter. Whether those people could pay mortgages didn't matter. Didn't matter. They needed 500 contracts within a week in order to make it work through 15 complicated things. We're paying, highly paid people to produce something for the high level investor. So they succeeded. 15 million plus contracts. All that mattered was the contract. So because it didn't matter whether those people could pay or not, it was like highway robbery. And this is how now they're doing it with student loans. They're doing it with used cars. So the issue is that we need to get rid of this financial logic produces expulsions. It integrates because that financial logic invades more and more domains, but at the same time the space of the economy shrinks. It's a multiple. Now these expulsions, I argue, it's many, many, many different things. Last year, 14 million Americans, these are figures that just came out, had an encounter, so to say, with a prison. That's the highest per capita rate in the world, higher than China, higher than... At any given moment, 7 million people are in jail, seriously in jail. That's a kind of expulsion, I argue. There are a few honest murderers. They're really the real thing. They really murder. Keep them in jail. But a lot of the people who are there. Now what we have, this guaranteed occupancy of private prisons. These are all these mechanisms that produce expulsion. I have a long, long list of these. I am going to go to the next one. Que usted me preguntó, me repite la pregunta ahora que... Claro, ahí está. Yes, so for instance, there are some interesting stuff happening. On the one hand, African women in the fields, they are pretty good. One problem is the land grabs. They're getting thrown out. 70 million hectares bought between 2006 and 2010. In the last 2 years, the main buyers of land are financial firms and hedge funds. Estimate up to 200 million. That is disturbing. This process that you saw in parts of South America and in parts of Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, where women had created sort of what I think of as sub-economies. What you see in immigrant communities, they create sub-economies, they are partial economies, but they belong to a specific site. They address the specifics of that site. This, to me, is a critical mechanism. So we have a lot of that in our cities, in many Western European countries and North America, thanks to immigrants. But clearly, that is not enough. And in Africa, a lot of that was happening in the fields, and that is now being deeply threatened. When people say urbanization, you have all these politicians saying, half of the people now live in cities. That is one of these dangerous categories, urbanization. I am interested in the shadow of urbanization, these extraordinary land grabs. You know, when China buys 3 million hectares of land, I don't want to hit on China, by the way. The financial firms are much worse. I have to end. Oh my God, I have a big sign here. But and economías solidarias in Latin America, it hasn't worked as well as we all hoped. But these are beginnings, they are trajectories. And I'm going to have to tell you personally what I think, you know, in terms of, because I really have to leave this podium. Thank you very, very much.